retiring in 2 weeks as the longtime chair of the astronomy department at Foothill College, where he taught classes on astronomy for poets to 900 students each year. Starting in the fall, he will be the professor of astronomy at the Fromm Institute at the University of San Francisco. He was the California Professor of the Year in 2007, and he has received several national awards for his work in explaining scientific ideas in everyday language. He is the lead author of a free electronic astronomy textbook, cleverly entitled Astronomy, published by OpenStax with support from the Gates and Hewlett Foundations. His children's book, When the Sun Goes Dark on Eclipses, was published in 2017 and is available for sale and signing at the exhibits area. Fraknoi appears regularly on local and national radio discussing astronomical news and ideas. Asteroid 4859 has been named Asteroid Fraknoi by the International Astronomical Union in recognition of his work making science accessible to public. Please welcome Andrew Fraknoi.
Thank you everyone for being here, and I just want to say that never has skeptical thinking been needed more in our country than right now. So I congratulate you for yes indeed. Today I want to talk a little bit about a special sky event that's coming up very soon in August, and all of you should have a pink sheet so that you don't need to take notes on the material. That has all the basic background information, and at the end I'm going to tell you about an 8-page booklet that's on the web that you can all download with some of the details that I'm going to be telling you about. The other thing is that at the end of the talk, we're all going to take a group picture with the Eclipse glasses. All of you in your folder have received a free pair of Eclipse glasses, courtesy of the organizers of the workshop. And so just make sure that at the end you participate in this group picture that Jeannie Scott wants us to have taken. But I want to tell you more about the eclipse. As many of you have heard, this eclipse will be a total eclipse of the sun in one country and one country only, and that's the United States of America. I'm sure that the current administration is going to take full credit for it once they wake up to the fact that it's happening. It's not on their radar right now. They've got other things to worry about. Now, many of you being sophisticated know what's happening during an eclipse. The moon is going to cover the sun. In some places it's going to be totally covered. In many places it'll be a partial eclipse. We'll talk about that in a second. But I want to make sure everyone understands how spectacular and special a coincidence it is that the moon as seen from the Earth and the sun as seen from the Earth happen to be the same size. We now know, having calculated it, that this is not true on any other planet-moon combination in the solar system. And if you don't believe me, here is the visual proof. This is one of the small moons of Mars, called Phobos, desperately trying to eclipse the sun and obviously failing at the task. Pretty pathetic eclipse as things go. So it really is a great credit to your good taste in being born on this planet that we get to see total eclipses of the sun. And here's what's happening in a total eclipse. The moon gets directly in front of the sun, and there is a very small part of the Earth, a small spot on the Earth, where the dark shadow is visible. And that dark shadow is where you have to be to see the total eclipse of the sun. This time the dark shadow will be only about 60 to 70 miles across, and I'll show you that path and tell you more about it. But again, just in case you're skeptical and you don't believe me that this is happening, here's a picture from space actually showing such a shadow spot from a previous eclipse. So we really do get the spot visible on a small part of the Earth, but then as the moon moves and the Earth turns, that spot moves across the face of the Earth. And so you get this eclipse moving at supersonic speed, and in this case it will move completely across the United States. Here's what we will see in sequence, with the moon first moving across the face of the sun, then covering it with the beautiful atmosphere of the sun coming out, which you can never see during the regular views of the sun, and then slowly the moon moves across and restores the sun to its former glory. Just before the total eclipse, you have this diamond ring effect, where the last little valley on the moon lets a last gleam of the sun through, and then the eclipse goes total. During a total eclipse, this is not taken this is not visible to the eye in this detail, but with a telescope and a good camera, you can record actual activity on the surface of the sun, vast jets of material pouring out of the sun. As I say, the faint atmosphere of the sun becomes visible, and for most of the observers, it is a great shock that the day actually turns into night. When the sun goes out, it's an eerie and magnificent feeling. The stars come out, animals are bewildered, all of nature changes, and it's really one of the once-in-a-lifetime experiences that you can have. For most of human history, though, there was great fear and surprise associated with eclipses before we could predict them properly. In many cultures like China, the thought was that a great dragon or monster was going to eat the sun, or was in the process of eating the sun. And the idea came about that if you made loud noise, if you banged pots and pans together, for example, it would scare the monster away. And this always worked. Today, when we can predict eclipses hundreds of years in advance, and we understand the natural conjunction that goes with eclipses, you might think that there's no more superstitious views like this to be had, but you would be far from the truth. I should mention before I go on to that this is Ed Krupp, the director of the Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles, and during each eclipse, he actually organizes a banging of pots and pans party around the observatory to demonstrate that this old knowledge still works. But what are we hearing today about modern eclipses? For example, there's a great deal of fear about pregnant women and eclipses, that it's dangerous for pregnant women to be exposed to an eclipse. The notion from India is that if you are a pregnant mother, doing these things during or after a solar eclipse will be bad for you. Crossing your feet, drinking water, letting any of the rays fall on you, and watching television. Now, this last is always bad for you, right? But you don't have to be pregnant to suffer from that. Again, I think good intentions are there. We want to protect pregnant women from all kinds of dangers. But an eclipse, which actually reduces the energy coming from the sun, is not the thing you should worry about. We also hear that you should throw away all leftover food. It's believed that food left over during an eclipse should be thrown away because it's no longer safe to eat. Now, you might think, well, here in America, certainly no one is thinking about this, but there have already been articles. For example, this one in the Washington Post from March of this year. This article quotes Gary Ray, a writer for the Christian publication Unsealed, that the Bible says a number of times that there's going to be signs in the heavens before Jesus Christ returns to earth. We see this eclipse as possibly one of those. Now, it's fascinating to me that they would see God so American-centric. After all, there's an eclipse somewhere. Each eclipse season, we'll talk about that, every 6 months, but God only intends the one over the United States to be a sign for important events. I think, again, our present administration would agree with that. Here's a letter from the Carbondale, Illinois Times in 2016, in which the letter writer also says that the eclipse that's coming, it will be total in Carbondale, is a sign from God that Jesus is returning soon. But I want to close this section with this article from the Daily Mail in 2011, in which doctors warn of permanent damage to eyesight from a second's look at the eclipse. From 1 second's look, there's no such danger. We'll talk about safe ways to see the eclipse. And what the doctor is quoted as saying is that the safest way to watch the eclipse is on television or live webcasts on the internet. And I hope no one pays attention to doctors who are saying that, because seeing an eclipse is one of the great experiences you can have, and I will tell you about ways to see it safely. So let's get back to reality. Here is the path of the eclipse this time. It's a rather narrow path starting on a beach in Oregon and ending on a beach in South Carolina. It crosses the entire United States, but not one large city is in the path of the total eclipse. This is an almost entirely rural and small town eclipse. There will be a tiny corner of St. Louis that experiences the total eclipse, and Nashville, Tennessee will be in the eclipse zone, but no other major city will get to see it. I think Airbnb is going to clean up on this eclipse, because there are very few hotels under the total eclipse zone, but many, many individuals living there. So by the way, if you have any relatives or former college roommates living anywhere in that zone, now's the time to remind them how much you miss them and you'd like to come visit in August. The states included in the total eclipse zone include the ones listed here, but again, remember, it's not all of those states, but just a 60 to 70 mile wide strip in those particular states. And if you're interested, maps are available on the web. There's a particularly good website called the Great American Eclipse website, which has excellent maps of where in each state the eclipse is visible. Here, for example, is the Great American Eclipse map of Oregon, and you can see that Portland is not under the eclipse shadow spot. Eugene, where the university is not, but many rural areas of Oregon are. And we'll come back to Oregon in a little while. Every city is vying to be the eclipse capital, including that metropolitan area called Hopkinsville, Kentucky. And their slogan is, the most exciting 2 minutes and 40 seconds in astronomy. You might know that that's the slogan of the Kentucky Derby, the most exciting 2 minutes in sports. Now, what's worrying, I've served for 2 years now on the National Task Force of Astronomers, trying to do eclipse outreach and education. And here is what's worrying us. The number of people who live in that eclipse path is about 12 million. It's only about 4% of the nation. But the number of people living within 100 miles of the eclipse path is 47 million. And it's very possible that in the weeks before the eclipse, when the media wake up to the fact that the eclipse is coming, many of these 47 million people will say, hey, driving 100 miles is no big deal. We'll just get up early that morning and we'll drive to the eclipse path. And if millions of people suddenly descend on the small rural roads and overwhelm the services in that tiny zone, it's going to be utter and total gridlock. In fact, I've sat in on phone calls that the Department of Transportation is having with the emergency managers in each state, and the biggest concern that they're talking about is porta potties. Seriously, if millions of people go into that zone at the last minute, services will simply break down. And in particular, where will all those people go to the bathroom? And where will they get snacks after the eclipse? So if you are going to be one of those people who decides to drive to Oregon from here, please plan ahead. Bring lots of things with you, including food and water. We're particularly afraid of what's going to happen on the roads. It's possible that there will be utter gridlock in the hours before, during, and after the eclipse. So again, that's a reason to plan ahead if you're going to be driving into that area. I don't want to be a Cassandra or a messenger of doom, but skeptics plan ahead anyway. It's in your blood, and I just want you to take it seriously. Now, most of us in the United States will see a partial eclipse, where part of the sun is covered by the moon. It is also beautiful if you get the right sky and if you have the right ways to watch it safely. You all do, because you've received glasses, safe eclipse glasses, as part of your attendance at this conference. But there will be many of us in this position. The best I can calculate is that between the United States, Canada, and Mexico, where the partial eclipse will be visible, there will be 473 million viewers on the ground, and they're not all going to have these glasses. We had a dream that so many people, well, this is our reaction to this whole problem. And the dream I had was that these glasses were going to be available at Starbucks. And that would take care of the whole problem. If Starbucks were willing to sell them, there's Starbucks everywhere. And we actually approached Starbucks to see if they were interested, and they were not. So I'll tell you what we were able to do. We did manage to get some things done. But we're going to need lots of eclipse glasses or smart people explaining what else you can do to view the eclipse. So I'll talk about that in a minute. Here, by the way, is the partial eclipse circumstances for the biggest cities in the United States. Most of you can't see that, and this won't be on the quiz, but I will tell you later where you can get an 8-page booklet free on the web where all this is exactly listed and where you can share it with your relatives and friends. I'll just mention that it's a pretty good partial eclipse around the major cities of the United States. New York City will have a 71% of the sun's area covered eclipse. In Washington, D.C., 81% of the sun will be covered, which is pretty typical of the cover-up in Washington, D.C. No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Here in San Francisco, we'll have 76% of the sun covered in the Bay Area. And here are the circumstances for us locally. It's a Monday morning, August 21. The partial eclipse begins for us at about 9 a.m. The largest part of the sun is covered at 10:15 a.m. and the eclipse will end by about 11:30. So it's a morning eclipse, and what I advise people to do is to go out on August 20th and see where the sun is at this time. If you're in an area where you can't see the sun on August 20th, you're not going to have much fun on the 21st. Get yourself to a position where at this time of day you can see the sun. And then all you need to do is to have the glasses with you, and you'll be able to see a nice partial eclipse. The cities where it's total are, as I said, relatively small cities: Salem, Oregon, Casper, Wyoming, St. Joseph, Missouri, and so on. Nashville, Tennessee is probably the one that you've heard of among these cities where it's total. And as the eclipse moves across the United States, it crosses time zones. So the further east you get, the later in the day it's going to be visible. Now, another factor that we need to take into consideration is weather. This is August in the United States, and there are often clouds. The world's expert on eclipse weather is Jay Anderson, this jovial Canadian meteorologist, and he has a special website where he keeps track of up-to-date eclipse predictions for each part of the country. It's called eclipsophile.com, and his current view is summarized in this rather complicated slide, where you see the percentage of likelihood of cloud cover on August 21st from past weather experience. And so you can see there's tremendous variation across the country. If you're in the right part of Oregon or Idaho, then your chances are 40–45% of cloud cover on August 21st. If you're in parts of South Carolina, there's an 80% chance of cloud cover. So this is really important if you're advising friends and relatives about viewing the eclipse. Weather issues should be part of their consideration. The more you can go to a place where the weather is likely to be clear, the more likely you are to have a good experience. And again, what we're worried about logistically is that if people have spent a lot of energy and effort getting into that total eclipse zone, and then it's cloudy where they are, they're not going to be happy with that. They're all going to rush to their cars and want to drive elsewhere. And the roads in those areas are not going to be able to sustain vast migrations in the hour before the eclipse. All right. Well, as I say, the eclipse is going to be on a Monday. We calculate that half the schools in the United States will be in session and half will not. So if you have kids or grandkids, you need to be thinking about this now. Are your kids or grandkids going to be in school? Is the teacher even aware of the eclipse? Will the school make any special provisions to view or not to view the eclipse? Many schools have a general knee-jerk reaction that anything dangerous, they should keep the kids indoors with the shades lowered, and therefore there are no insurance consequences to this. And we hope that teachers are going to be a little better educated this time around. We've actually been working with school teachers around the country for about 2 years, trying to get teachers ready for this. But again, interested taxpayers and parents of the kids can have a big influence on what the teachers might be planning to do. If, on the other hand, everybody in the family is on vacation, you might want to prepare the kids for a pretty interesting experience. There's a lot of misinformation out there. I don't know if you can read this in the back. Silly me, Hank, I got it backwards. It's cardboard for a solar eclipse and binoculars for a lunar eclipse. And poor Hank has no eyes left at this point. So it is important to have good safety information, and we'll talk about that in just a second. I do want to mention that this is not the first time in recent memory that we've had an eclipse cross the country. Just 99 years ago, a little bit before my time, but some of the older skeptics remember this well. In 1918, we did have another eclipse that crossed the country, and thousands pointed glasses at the sun to watch the eclipse. The only difference this time will be in the number of significant digits, right? It'll be millions of people pointing their glasses. So eclipse glasses are available. 2 companies in the United States in particular manufacture them. They also make 3D glasses for movies. American Paper Optics is one of them. Rainbow Symphony is the other. Bulk rates are available. So if you and your civic group, you and your skeptics organization, you and the school want to get together and order the eclipse glasses in advance, the sooner you do it, the better. The factories are still churning them out in thousands and thousands, but right at the eclipse time, they're going to be overwhelmed. They expect to be overwhelmed. So the sooner you can order the glasses for your school or for your group, the better. And again, in that booklet that I'm going to talk to you about, these web addresses are listed, so you don't need to write them down. But the question we had, getting back to my story about how we deal with so many people wanting to see the eclipse, is how we can get eclipse classes to a lot of people. And it occurred to us that public libraries are in the business of distributing community-wide information. So we were able to talk I'm delighted to say, the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation and a company you may have heard of called Google into providing free of charge 2 million Eclipse glasses, which are now being distributed to public libraries nationwide. It's not Starbucks, but we did something. I feel good about it. So here in the Bay Area, for example, the Berkeley Library is participating. The Oakland Library is participating. I'm going to be training all the Oakland librarians later this summer on how to tell the public correctly about the eclipse. Many of the libraries on the peninsula are participating. So if you need eclipse glasses in small quantities, you can approach your local library and ask them if they're part of this program. The entire project is being done through StarNet, which is a NASA-sponsored nationwide library network. And here you see the current map of all the libraries participating. I like all the green pins there. We have 4,800 public libraries participating so far. So it really is. It says 2,100, but that's out of date. Yeah. All right, so that's one place to get glasses in small quantities. On June 20th, the United States Postal Service will be issuing the first ever thermochromic ink stamp about the eclipse. Now, I'd never heard of that word either. What the heck is thermochromic when it comes to stamps? Well, it turns out it's a stamp where if you touch it, the heat of your hand will change the stamp. And it'll go from this to this, and when it cools off, back to that. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, a thermochromic ink stamp. You don't usually think of the federal government being ahead of the curve, but here is an example where indeed they are. So I think this will be the time when many people in the public, in the media, wake up to the eclipse happening, and that's when the services will be completely overwhelmed in the eclipse zone. Hotels are already pretty much sold out. Some campus dorms are still available. But if you want to get into that zone, act before June 20th. That's my advice to you. Now, what can you do if you want to view the eclipse and you don't have enough of these glasses for everybody? Well, there are a number of things you can do. I'll talk about them briefly, but again, they're detailed with good instructions in that booklet. One thing you can do if you have binoculars is, first of all, don't look through the binoculars. If the sun is dangerous to the naked eye, the binoculars and telescopes only concentrate the rays of the sun. So what you want to do is cover up one of the binocular lenses and then simply project an image through that remaining lens onto a white piece of paper on the other end, and that projected image is perfectly safe to look at, and many people in your party can look at that image at the same time. Another easy thing to do is to take a hand mirror or compact, cover it with cardboard, cut a small hole in it, a little smaller than a dime, and then use that to reflect a picture of the sun onto a white wall or some other surface where many people can view it. It takes a little bit of skill to get the angle right without looking at the sun, that the sun's rays on the mirror and then reflected to a wall, sun's rays on the mirror reflected to a screen. So I advise people not to try this for the first time the day of the eclipse. Practice on days before the eclipse. So if you're going to be the leader of your group doing this, you should be good at it by August 21. But that's another way to show people the eclipse safely. A simple but somewhat frustrating way of doing it is to make a pinhole viewer. You can take a piece of cardboard, put some aluminum foil in the center of it, make a pinhole, a very tiny hole in the aluminum foil, and project a small image of the partially eclipsed sun on a white sheet of paper some distance away from the first piece of cardboard. The image is awfully small, but if you're just showing the partially eclipsed sun, it's often good enough. A more fun way of doing it is to bring a colander with you. Turns out that all the holes in a colander are excellent pinholes, And if you then hold it over your shoulder, pointing at the sun, the shadow on the ground will show lots of partial eclipses, as you see here. And then the colander can be a fashion statement or protection from the sun while you're waiting. If you are not ready to bring a colander with you, also if you're near a tree with a lot of crisscrossing leaves, the tree will make such a shadow pattern for you. If you really get desperate, you can just cross your hands, and your crossed fingers will also make the kind of pinhole pattern which will make a shadow of the partial eclipse on the ground for you. So this is a great way to amaze the kids and keep them amused during the partial eclipse. So again, the best thing though is to have these simple and inexpensive viewers that you all have, and make sure that the kids know how to use them. It's really important that kids not look at the sun when any part of the sun is exposed, that they be trained before the eclipse happens, that if you put the eclipse glasses on them, you hook them safely behind their ears so that while they're excited, the eclipse glasses don't come off. As I say, we've been working with teachers, particularly the National Science Teachers Association has been very active in eclipse education around the country. My co-author and I have written a book called Solar Science, which has been training teachers. This is a book of classroom activities that teachers can use and scout leaders can use to teach about the sun, seasons, eclipses, the phases of the moon, etc. But I bring up that book not to make a shameless plug, but because it's from that book that this 8-page booklet has been made available free on the web by the National Science Teachers Association. And here is the web address that you should go to download that booklet. And by the way, you don't need to write it down because it's on the pink sheet I gave you. The pink sheet is a little summary of all the information about the eclipse. By the way, feel free to Xerox that and send it to friends and take total credit for it or whatever you want to do. It's for your use. But this is the website from which you can go directly to this 8-page booklet. And again, that's something you can distribute to anyone and everyone. I will make this shameless plug, as you heard this already, that my good friend and co-author Dennis Schatz and I have written a book for kids, which is not just a storybook about eclipses, but includes a number of home activities that families can do to get kids ready to understand what happens during an eclipse. Using a lamp and a tennis ball, you can do fun activities in your own living room, which will make kids much more knowledgeable by August 21. So we'll have that book on the back table in the book area if anyone is interested. I do want to mention a couple of fun citizen science projects. Google is in the process of enlisting thousands of photographers around the United States to send wirelessly pictures of the total eclipse as they take them to Google. Google will stitch these together. They've written a pretty complicated piece of software to stitch the eclipse pictures together in such a way that the scale is maintained, and they're going to make a mega movie watching the eclipse as it travels from one side of the United States to the other, all with contributed citizen science pictures. So that should be quite a movie. Should be available, they say, by the afternoon or evening of the day of the eclipse. And they're still looking for good photographers who want to participate and send this to Google. But let me say, if you have never seen a total eclipse and you're planning to go up there, the longest this eclipse will last is 2 minutes and 40 seconds. And during those 2 minutes, if you're an eclipse virgin, you should do nothing but look. Fiddling with equipment, trying to get your camera to work is probably the worst thing you can do. This eclipse is really quite something. It's a wonderful personal experience. You are struck with awe as the entire world goes dark and this halo appears around the sun. Please try to experience it and not get lost in equipment. But if you've seen dozens of them and you're a great photographer, do participate in this project. Another interesting project called Life Responds is being done by the California Academy of Sciences here in San Francisco. They are asking people via a phone app to report on the behavior of animals during the eclipse. What will be the reaction of domestic animals and wild animals during the time that it goes dark unexpectedly in the day? We've had many anecdotal reports over the years about animals going crazy or being absolutely still, and now they want to have actual data about what animals are doing. So if you're an animal lover, please participate in Life Response. NASA is going to be quite involved with the eclipse. All NASA assets, instruments that can be turned to the eclipse will be turned to the eclipse. And they have an eclipse website, which is quite useful, and lots of information on it. Again, it's on your pink sheet. Those of you who want to do eclipse photography or who want more detailed technical information about the eclipse, the American Astronomical Society has been working on this task force that I mentioned for you, and also on a website called eclipse.waas.org, also on your pink sheet, where there's a lot of reliable information. Particularly if you have an eye doctor who's saying weird things. Many eye doctors get very high and mighty during eclipses, and they say very sort of strong warning things about the eclipse that are unnecessary. There's a whole page here for eye doctors to read to get reality and to not be spreading misinformation. So this is a good, more technical site for people interested in detailed eclipse information. Well, let me say a word or two about what makes eclipses special. Many of you know that the moon goes around the Earth every month. That's what it does. If you look at the moon's business card, it says, I orbit the Earth. So why don't we have an eclipse every month when the moon gets into that part of the sky where the sun is? And here you see the answer. The moon's orbital plane is actually tilted a little bit relative to the orbital plane of the solar system. So most of the time, when the moon and the sun are in the same part of the sky where we're seeing them from Earth, the moon is either above the sun or below the sun, and we don't get to see an eclipse. The analogy I like to use with kids and students is of two hula hoops, which are crossing. One hula hoop shows you the orbit of the moon every month, or month as you pronounce it, and then the orbit of the apparent orbit of the sun as we orbit around it. The sun every year makes a circle in our sky, and you can see that the two orbits, the sun and the moon, are not aligned, they're tilted, but twice a year they cross. And those two times, about 6 months apart, where the two orbits cross, are called eclipse season, and eclipses are possible during those two periods of time. Somewhere in the world there's an eclipse of the sun or the moon each eclipse season, but not necessarily anywhere near as good as the one we're going to have this time, because 2/3 of the Earth's surface is water. So the most likely place for that eclipse spot to fall is somewhere in the ocean, where rich people spend thousands of dollars renting a boat to get them there, but the average person will never see it. So it is unusual to have an eclipse which is over so much land, so much populated land as the one we're going to have August 21. A bit about the science. The sun's surface, called the photosphere, is what's normally visible and not safe to look at without protection. But during an eclipse, we see the outer layers of the sun, the atmosphere of the sun, which is much fainter. There's a layer called the chromosphere, and then a much larger outer atmosphere called the corona. And we've actually learned about the existence of these layers through eclipses, and in the past we've only been able to study these outer layers of the sun during eclipses. Nowadays, our satellites and instruments can make artificial eclipses, but for a long time, this is the way we learned about the outer layers, the active and actual quite important outer layers. Much of the output of the sun comes from these outer layers. Vast jets of hot material fly outward, sometimes toward the Earth. So studying this is of some consequence. Here you see Albert Einstein laughing, and he's laughing on this slide because his most important and sexy theory was confirmed during an eclipse. Many of you know that just about 100 years ago, Albert Einstein published the general theory of relativity, which in everyday terms talks about the warping of space by gravity, actually the warping of space-time by gravity. And Einstein said that in any situation where there's strong gravity, you should be able to see space actually warp, bend, distort in that neighborhood. The Earth is, no offense, too pathetic in its gravity to show much of this effect, but he reasoned that the sun would be a great place to see the bending of space. And so if you could see starlight coming by the sun, that starlight would travel through slightly warped space, and maybe we could see that. There's a small technical problem seeing starlight coming by the sun. What's the small technical problem? It's a little too bright, right? So normally no one can see starlight near the sun, but during an eclipse, the sun actually goes out, stars become visible. And so Einstein said, look at the position of the stars, whose light you see closest to the sun. They will be traveling through warped space, and they will seem to be out of position from where they normally are. In 1919, there was an eclipse of the sun. World War I had prevented people from confirming this until the war was over, but by 1919 there was an eclipse of the sun visible from the coast of Africa. A team of astronomers and scientists went to the eclipse. They made measurements, and the stars were out of place, just the way Einstein had predicted. And this is what made Einstein world famous. Before this, Einstein was known only to scientists, but after that, he was the most famous scientist in the world for the rest of his life. Well, if you should need to miss this eclipse, or if you can't get rooms in the total zone, I have good news for you. It turns out that there will be another eclipse of the sun, a total eclipse, crossing the United States in only 7 years. April 8th, 2024, there will be an eclipse diagonally crossing the United States in a different way. This is the upcoming eclipse. This is the 2024 eclipse. So those of you who are younger people, make plans now for the April 2024 eclipse. Those of us older should eat our vitamins, so we're all around to enjoy this second all-American eclipse in 7 years. For now, let me finish up by showing you the sky on August 21st. When the sun is eclipsed, Venus will be right there next to the sun. So you will be, even if you don't know the sky at all, there'll be one bright point next to the eclipsed sun, and you can, with full confidence and knowledge, say, oh, I know that, that's Venus, right next to the sun. Well, I hope in this short talk I've given you lots to chew on about eclipses, and I know that there will be a lot of misinformation for which I think skeptics will be badly needed. There are already lots of groups claiming that the end is near or special things are going to happen, so I hope after you get through dealing with them, you'll take a little swig of Corona beer and wash it all down with that. But seriously, let me wish all of you clear skies and good companions for August 21st. Thank you very much. So before we take questions, let's all put on our glasses. Where are all the photographers? Are we ready for this? It's in your packet. In your blue folder that you got a pair of glasses. Bend them where the perforation is. Try not to touch the plastic itself. put the ends behind your ears. Is this what, is this? Yeah, looks good, looking better and better. All right, even I'll take one with my phone here. But the professional photographer will take much better pictures. And everybody will look extremely knowledgeable and scientific. There you go. Excellent.
Can we get everyone pointing to the sky?
Yeah, everyone point up. There you go. I don't know what they're going to do with these pictures. People in the front row should sign a release.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Now I'm happy to take questions.
Ooh, we don't really have time.
Oh, we have no
so
time.
I'm going to ask one question.
Okay.
Where are you going to go?
Well, I'm going to an undisclosed location, of course. But no, we actually do have we're going to be in Oregon. And what we've done, worrying about the transportation, is we've made a deal with the pastor of a church that we can sleep in the pews the night before if we explain the eclipse to the congregation on the morning of the eclipse. So it'll be a really nice bringing together of religion and science, which I know our groups are well known for. So.